She stood in the bathroom doorway, holding the test like it might burn her. Her hands trembled, and her knuckles were white against the plastic. I saw the result before she spoke, 2 lines, bold and unmistakable. But it wasn't the test that stopped me cold. It was her voice. "I'm finally ready," she whispered, eyes shining. But there was something off, just beneath the words, like static behind a love song. Too careful. Too rehearsed. It should have felt like the moment I'd waited for. We'd danced around this conversation for years. She always said she wasn't ready. The reasons kept changing. Her job, her identity, the world. But the answer was always no. I respected it. Or at least I told myself I did. I wanted her heart in it, not just her body. So this should have been joy. A victory. A beginning. But instead, it felt like a cue line in a play I didn't know I was in. I pulled her into a hug, kissed her temple, told her it was everything I wanted. She smiled, pressed her forehead to mine. "It's real now," she said. I nodded, trying not to look too hard at her eyes. Later, we curled up on the couch, a blanket over our legs, her head resting on my shoulder. She wanted to start a Pinterest board. "Nursery colors," she said. "Neutral, but not boring." She laughed. I laughed. I asked about names and she rattled off a few like she'd been collecting them in secret. I kept smiling, playing the part. But something in my chest felt wrong, like a loose bolt inside a machine. The joy didn't land, it just hovered. At 2:17 a.m., I was still awake. She'd fallen asleep easily, her face calm, breathing slow and even. I watched her in the dim glow of the nightlight we always left on. She looked peaceful, happy, but I wasn't. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand, just once, a soft hum. She didn't stir. I didn't touch it. I just listened. She turned onto her side, arms slipping across my chest. And then, softly, she spoke, barely above breath, like she was dreaming. "Just hoping it all works out with the due date." My body went still. Due date? She'd taken the test today. This was supposed to be day 1. But that phrase, due date, it didn't belong. Not unless she already had a timeline. Not unless this wasn't news to her at all. I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding, but slow. Not panic. Something colder. More calculating. I reached for my phone and quietly opened our shared calendar. Nothing unusual. No hidden appointments. No strange entries. She'd been at work all week, same as me. Nothing out of place. Except her words. "Just hoping it all works out with the due date." That's not something you say on the first day of discovery. That's something you say when the clock is already ticking. I slid out of bed at dawn, made coffee in silence. She joined me 20 minutes later, yawning, hair still tousled from sleep. She leaned in for a kiss, and I let her. She poured her mug and started talking about prenatal vitamins. I nodded and smiled. Even joked that she'd have to give up sushi. But I wasn't listening to the words anymore. I was studying her, watching for tells. That flicker behind her eyes when I asked about the timing. The too smooth way she said, "It must have happened just last week." It didn't add up. And suddenly, I couldn't stop myself from seeing everything twice. Once for what it appeared to be, and again for what it might actually mean. That night, as she drifted off beside me, I stayed awake again, wide-eyed, breathing through clenched teeth. The dream I'd carried so long, becoming a father with her, was shifting under my feet. I could already feel it coming apart, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. And deep down, I already knew, I wasn't going to like what I found. The next morning, she sent me a text from work with a baby emoji and a heart. "Thinking about you. And us." Sweet. Perfect. If I hadn't already started watching her closely, I might have melted into it. Instead, I responded with a smiley face and stared at the message for a long time, wondering what it really meant. That's what it had become. Every sentence she said now carried 2 meanings. There was the surface, and then there was the undercurrent, and I was learning how to read both. She kissed me on the forehead when she got home that night. Told me she was feeling nauseous but happy. We ordered Thai. Ate on the couch like old times. She reached for my hand mid-meal, squeezed it, and said, "I'm glad we're finally doing this together." The words should have felt like a dream come true. But I had already begun the audit. I didn't go digging all at once. No late-night ransackings or reckless accusations. I was smarter than that. If I was wrong, I needed to be able to live with myself. If I was right, I'd only get one shot to confront it clean. So I started small. We shared a digital calendar, mostly synced for dinner plans, work trips, and occasional reminders. I went through it backward, month by month. Her team-building retreat had been 4 weekends ago. I remembered that because she'd sent me a selfie from the hotel, her, and 2 women from her department, smiling over cocktails. I stared at that photo again, trying to read between the smiles. The hotel name was in the background. I searched my inbox and found the forwarded itinerary from that same trip. 3 days. Shared rooms. Or so I'd believed. Then I remembered her tablet. She barely used it anymore. An old one we kept in the kitchen drawer, mostly dead from battery neglect. But when I plugged it in, it lit up. Still connected to our Wi-Fi. Still logged into her email. I told myself I was only looking to reassure myself. That if I found nothing, I'd delete my browser history and forget the itch that had started gnawing at the back of my mind. But I didn't find nothing. Buried between ads and newsletters was a message from a local clinic. Subject line: appointment confirmation, ultrasound scan. I clicked it. The date was clear, nearly 3 weeks ago. The message thanked her for choosing their facility, listed billing details, and confirmed her visit for a preliminary scan. I stared at the screen. A chill spread through my chest like ice poured straight into my lungs. 3 weeks ago. She had told me just yesterday. Even if I was generous with the timeline, it didn't make sense. She had taken the test. With me. But she'd already been to a scan. I checked the billing summary. No mention of insurance. Just a line item for a private pay sonogram and lab work. The father field? Left blank. I backed out of the message and typed the clinic's name into her email search bar. A second email appeared, earlier than the first. It included an attached PDF. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. Another scan. This one black and white, grainy, with standard medical headers, and empty in the bottom left corner where the partner's name usually goes. I stared at it for a long time. Then I made a decision. I started a folder. Not on her tablet, on mine. I sent copies of the emails to a private account I controlled. Renamed them by date. Began a log. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a trail. That night, we watched a show together. She curled up next to me like nothing was different. Laughed at all the right places. Asked if I thought we need to move to a bigger place eventually. I nodded. Said I liked the idea of a backyard. But my mind was already somewhere else. Because while she was thinking about baby names and nursery walls, at least pretending to, I was calculating dates, archiving files, and trying to find out what else she hadn't told me. The distance between her words and her truths wasn't just growing, it had already swallowed us whole. I didn't look at her the same after that night. I couldn't. She was still affectionate, touches on my shoulder, brushing her hand along my neck as she passed me in the kitchen, but each gesture felt like someone signing a check with someone else's pen. Something borrowed. Something not hers to give anymore. I kept track of everything. Every detail. I created a private spreadsheet with folders nested by date, emails, screenshots, even copies of calendar entries and location data I quietly extracted from her cloud backups. If I was going to confront her, I wasn't going to rely on feelings. I'd use facts. Facts don't shake when the truth comes calling. And yet, for all my planning, there were moments, quiet ones, that crushed me harder than any proof. One afternoon, while she was at work, I opened the old dresser drawer in the guest room where we'd once stored books we didn't want to get rid of but couldn't quite look at either. I found the paperback on top, exactly where I'd left it, Becoming Dad. I'd bought it a year ago after one of our better talks about the future. We were sipping wine on the back patio, fire pit burning low, and she asked what I thought a good father looked like. I guess someone who knows when to be soft and when to be steel, I told her. She smiled, leaned into my shoulder and said, I think you'd be amazing at it. That night, I'd ordered the book. The receipt was still tucked inside. Now I sat on the edge of the guest bed, flipping through pages I hadn't touched in months. I should have been filled with hope, but instead, I was cross-referencing sonogram dates with when she claimed we'd started trying. They didn't line up. According to the clinic email, the scan was taken at around 8 weeks gestation. That put conception over 2 months ago. We had only stopped using protection a few weeks back, at her request. She'd made it feel spontaneous, romantic, said she felt ready now, like the timing had finally synced with her spirit. But it hadn't. She hadn't gotten pregnant with me. She had already been pregnant when she made that decision. The lie wasn't just about timing. It was about intention. That's what hit the hardest, realizing this wasn't just a passive mistake. She had known. She had looked me in the eye, pretended to begin something sacred with me, knowing it had already begun with someone else. That night, I sat in the living room with the baby name list open on my laptop. We'd started it months ago. A shared document, private only to us. Some of the names had little notes next to them. You picked this one after your grandpa. Or, too trendy maybe? I stared at the top name. Elias. One we both liked. Then I clicked, make a copy, and saved it under a different title, one only I would recognize. I wasn't ready to delete it. Not yet, but it didn't belong in our folder anymore. Later, I asked her casually if she remembered when we stopped being careful. Her eyes flicked upward like she was checking her memory. Early last month? She said. I smiled. That sounds right. She didn't catch it. That's when I knew she was still lying. Still protecting the story. That night, as I lay beside her again in the quiet dark, I realized I wasn't just documenting evidence. I was mourning. Mourning the future I thought we were building. Mourning the version of her I'd built my loyalty around. She turned to me in her sleep, murmured something soft. I didn't flinch. I just stared at the ceiling and pictured the sonogram in my inbox. 8 weeks. That baby had already begun before she came to me with trembling hands and rehearsed words. And no matter how calm I stayed, no matter how careful my planning, I was starting to understand the weight of what it meant. I wasn't just losing a future. I was preparing to walk away from a life I still loved, because she'd already invited someone else into it. The mistake was hers. Not in the lie, she'd done well there, but in her digital habits. She wasn't as thorough as she thought. Most people aren't. We all leave fingerprints in the places we assume no one else looks. I'd created a separate folder in her cloud account weeks earlier, disguised as a shared document for work. Hidden in plain sight, linked only to me, and I used it to run deeper searches. One afternoon, while she was at a prenatal yoga class, I knew the schedule now, down to the minute. I sat at my desk, typing in the name of the clinic from the confirmation email. Dozens of search hits. I opened one I hadn't seen before, a follow-up email from the clinic with a new scan attached. It wasn't forwarded. It had been directly emailed to her personal account and labeled, Second Trimester Preview. I clicked on the image, heart flatlining to a slow, mechanical beat. At first, it was the same grainy silhouette. The kind that had once filled me with anticipation, now made my stomach turn. But then my eyes shifted to the top right corner of the printout. It was faint, just barely legible in gray toner. 2 names. One was hers. The other wasn't mine. The second name printed alongside hers was Brian Keller. The air in the room seemed to disappear. My ears rang like I'd been hit in the head. Brian. Her coworker. The one she always called practically family. The one she shared inside jokes with, stayed late at the office with. The one from the team building retreat 4 weekends ago. The same retreat where she supposedly bunked with 2 female coworkers. My stomach twisted. I searched the name through her inbox, and there it was, an RSVP email to the retreat, confirming her arrival with one other guest, Brian Keller. I remembered asking how the weekend had gone. She'd smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, honestly? Kind of boring. I stared at the name on the sonogram for a long time, until it blurred. Until it burned. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and drank it slowly, both hands on the counter. I didn't scream. I didn't punch anything. I didn't even cry. I'd crossed a line inside myself. A quiet one. A line between suspicion and certainty. Between mourning and resolve. The emotional bond hadn't snapped all at once. It had unraveled, thread by thread, in the silence between her false smiles and the echo of that name in my head. Brian Keller. He was married. I'd met his wife once at a work Christmas party. Blonde, polite, quiet. I remember she brought lemon bars. I didn't know how much his wife knew, or if she knew anything. But that wasn't my concern yet. I opened a new file, titled it Legal Strategy, and began outlining steps: financial protection, consultation with a family lawyer, paternity disavowal documents. The emotional devastation would come later. For now, I had to stay cold. I called a contact I trusted, someone from college who had gone into family law and owed me a favor. I asked what I'd need to prepare to legally protect myself from paternity claims if it ever came to that. She didn't ask questions. She just told me to gather proof, document everything, and above all, Don't let her know I knew. Once you confront her, it changes the battlefield, she said. Until then, keep the high ground. So I did. The next morning, Michelle made pancakes. She danced around the kitchen to some 90s throwback playlists, flipping them with exaggerated flair, giggling when she dropped one. I sat at the table, watching her perform. She looked like the woman I married, but I couldn't see her the same anymore. Not with that name burned into my vision like a scar I hadn't earned. She leaned over to kiss me on the cheek, her lips warm, her hand resting on my shoulder. You okay, babe? You seem quiet. I smiled. Just tired. She nodded, turned back to the stove. And in that moment, I realized she didn't suspect a thing. But I wasn't asleep anymore. I was awake. And I was going to end this on my terms. 2 weeks passed in silence. Not between us, between truths. We still spoke, still touched, still shared meals and schedules and sleep. But I'd already stepped out of the marriage, emotionally. She just didn't know it yet. The timing was delicate. I didn't want to make a single move too soon. Every step had to be exact. Legal counsel confirmed what I feared. If I waited too long after the birth, and my name appeared on any document, I could be financially liable regardless of biological fact. And if I confronted her before confirming paternity, I risked triggering damage I couldn't contain. So I moved with precision. I'd been collecting discarded items, used utensils, floss, even the edge of a drinking straw, any potential DNA source I could send out for private paternity comparison when the time came. I also scheduled an appointment with a different clinic to consult anonymously about disavowal filings, just in case. But the moment that truly broke me didn't come from strategy. It came from a box. I was looking for an old insurance document she'd asked about, something buried in the hall closet where we kept spare files, expired warranties, and cords for devices we no longer owned. I opened one drawer, then another, then saw a small white box tucked beneath a folder labeled winter stuff. The box had no label, just a pale ribbon tied in a loose bow. For a second, I hesitated. Then I opened it. Inside was a onesie. Soft, white, still folded with the price tag tucked inside. Beside it, tiny suede shoes. Not cheap ones either. The kind you buy when the gesture matters more than the function. And then I saw the card, cream-colored, tucked beneath the shoes. My name written in her handwriting. I opened it slowly. To the best future dad in the world. I love you. My fingers clenched the card tighter with each word. I sat down on the floor, legs folding underneath me, and stared at the handwriting like it might vanish if I blinked hard enough. She had planned this. Not the baby, me. She had planned to cast me in this role, fully, irrevocably, without consent, without truth, the timing, the reveal, the emotional staging, the test in the bathroom, the trembling hands. It hadn't been a moment of vulnerability. It had been a performance, and the worst part? It had worked. She'd known what I wanted, known how much it meant to me to raise something that belonged to both of us. She'd used that truth like a weapon, a lure. And now I sat on the cold hardwood floor, holding a card written for a man she had no intention of being honest with. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just sat there, the box open in front of me, a cruel altar to a dream that had never existed. After an hour, maybe more, I stood up, returned everything exactly as I'd found it. The box, the card, the ribbon. I wanted her to have no warning, no sign that I had seen the truth. Not yet. That night, I lay beside her again. She rubbed her stomach absently, a soft smile on her lips as she read some parenting blog on her phone. You think it'll be a boy or girl? She asked. I turned to her slowly, held her gaze, and said, Either way, I'll be ready. She smiled, touched my face, and I smiled back. But inside, something in me had hardened. Not anger, not even grief anymore, just clarity. I would confront her, but I wouldn't rage. I wouldn't collapse. I would destroy the illusion calmly, methodically, and she would see what it felt like to be unmasked, not with screaming, with silence so sharp it cut. The night I chose to confront her was quiet by design. A soft Thursday, a meal on the table, warm lighting, nothing to set off alarms. She walked in smiling, humming some song under her breath. She even joked that it smelled too nice for it to just be pasta. I smiled back. That smile was the last thing I gave her freely. Dinner passed with surface chatter. She told me about a podcast she was listening to, something about brain development. I nodded where I needed to, my face smooth, my mind already locked into the next step. After we cleared the plates, I brought the folder out. No fanfare. Just placed it in the center of the table and sat back down. Her face changed the moment she touched the paper. She opened it slowly. 4 printed pages. No commentary from me. She could read. And she did. Her eyes scanned the sonogram. The date. The name. Page 2, the clinic billing summary. Page 3, confirmation of her retreat lodging, shared with him. And the final page, her handwritten card. The one she tucked into the box like a landmine wrapped in ribbon. She sat back, lips parted but frozen. Her hand stayed on the table, unmoving. The silence between us was full of sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the rise and fall of her breath as she processed what I knew. She looked up once, just once, and in that glance was everything I needed. I didn't ask for an explanation. Not really. I'd already lived through too many of her words. Words had brought me here. There were a few things said, quiet, controlled, stripped of performance. She tried to offer a shape to the lie, something easier to look at than what it really was. But I didn't interrupt her. I didn't accuse or dramatize. I simply corrected the record where needed, then let the facts sit. She stayed seated long after I left the table. That night, I moved to the guest room. She didn't follow. The next morning, I filed. My attorney submitted everything: divorce proceedings, non-paternity documentation, asset protections, clean, fast, airtight. He told me I'd done everything right, given myself leverage that couldn't be erased by sentiment or delay. The damage rippled fast. Brian didn't answer his office phone after my envelope reached his mailbox. I hadn't included a note. I didn't need to. By Monday, half the office knew. Not because I said a word, but because people like Michelle always leave more mess than they think. It leaks like water through rotted wood. Her reputation cracked. Friends pulled away. One even emailed me an apology, said he believed in her honesty once too. Some of those friendships were mine. Some of the losses stung more than I expected, but not enough to stop me. I cleared out the house by the end of the week, took what was mine, left what was hers. No drama. Just boxes, labeled and stacked. I didn't take keepsakes. I didn't take the book on fatherhood. I just took my name back. It had been 6 days since I filed when I found her folder. I hadn't meant to. I wasn't snooping. Those days were behind me. I was simply packing the last of my books, the kind I never got around to shelving: political biographies, travel guides, a half-finished journal I'd only written in during our first year of marriage. The drawer stuck slightly when I pulled it open, and wedged behind the books, half buried, was a slim red binder. It wasn't labeled, but the moment I opened it, I understood. It was dated 2 weeks before our confrontation. Inside, custody paperwork, drafts of declarations, outlines for legal positioning, letters from an attorney, hers. She'd retained counsel well before I'd confronted her. There was even a draft petition seeking primary custody. Not of a baby that was mine, but of one she had planned to make mine. I read her declaration line by line. Phrases like emotional absence, history of cold behavior, and deep concern about stability. She had built a case, piece by piece, against me, all while kissing me goodnight and thanking me for bringing her tea in the mornings. And she might have succeeded, if I'd believed her, if I had followed the script, if I had waited just a few more weeks, signed just one hospital form, attached my name to just one line. I sat down on the floor again, binder in my lap, and just breathed. It didn't hurt the way it used to. Not anymore. It was worse than pain. It was clarity. There had never been a version of this where she told me the truth. She wasn't just hiding a mistake, she had strategized a future around it. My name on paper, my wallet opened, my presence turned into legal weight to anchor someone else's responsibility. Even now, I didn't think she was evil. Just methodical, afraid, and willing to use love as a tool when fear wasn't enough. In the weeks that followed, things moved quickly. I signed a lease on a quiet apartment on the edge of town. Sparse furniture, clean walls, no echo of our shared life. At first, the silence was suffocating. I'd wake expecting her shape beside me, smell something that reminded me of her shampoo. I deleted photos slowly, not all at once. The ones from Italy took the longest to erase.